The loss of biodiversity represents one of the most important challenges of the modern world. It threatens the systems that support life on the planet. Studies like the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment show that biodiversity and the ecosystems it supports must be managed sustainably in order for our economies to thrive. Still, biodiversity and ecosystem services continue to be degraded at ever-increasing rates. Last year, the award-winning campaign for the International Year of Biodiversity highlighted the importance of biodiversity to humanity and sought to catalyze the global community and individual actors to be better stewards of biodiversity. The International Decade of Biodiversity provides us a continuing opportunity to talk and think about biodiversity with a perspective that resonates more strongly with the public and policymakers. The actions required to better manage and market biodiversity over the next decade are achievable, but oblige us to look forward and embrace innovation above all. We need to shift our collective optics in a way that allows everybody to see protected areas as a central part of the ecological infrastructure necessary for sustainable societies. Looked at from a different vantage point, protected areas can be economically valued for their contribution to conservation, ecosystem-based adaptation, and ecosystem service provision, and managed with this in mind. Productive activities in the landscape and seascapes outside of formal protected areas must be supported to mainstream biodiversity considerations into their activities and not the other way around. Thus, sustainable economic development accelerates sustainable use of biodiversity rather than overexploiting it. Biodiversity planning has to be transformed from strategies and action plans developed in isolation to biodiversity being embedded in all sectoral planning documents. Only in this way will we be able to reach the transformative scale necessary to achieve the target identified in the new strategic plan of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Making biodiversity relevant requires greater imagination and an emphasis on innovation of all kinds. It demands new governance approaches to protected areas, the creation and identification of new markets and payment schemes for biodiversity goods and services, and land use planning approaches that embedded biodiversity into all territorial decision-making. I must also share with you an inconvenient truth. There is not enough money in the world to address each and every threat to biodiversity through traditional financing measures. We need to embrace that fact. This should not be a cause for alarm, as the conservation community is marked by an entrepreneurial spirit characterized by early ideas like debt for nature swaps and trust funds as the means to finance the protection of biodiversity. This remains an area that is ripe for continuing innovation. Biodiversity offsets, payment for ecosystem services, species and habitat banking, REDD+, and certification all offer great opportunities for scaling up and reducing the funding gap for biodiversity. Finally, we all know that changing our own individual behavior is very hard. Multiply that challenge times 7 billion and you can begin to imagine the difficulties we face to catalyze the global behavior change that is necessary to achieve the conservation targets in the new CBD strategic plan. We have 20 years of experience to conclude that the messaging of the biodiversity community is not working well. Linking biodiversity with loss and extinction leads to guilt, not action. In order to catalyze the individual and global action necessary to achieve the targets in the CBD strategic plan, the following steps must be taken. First, to catalyze individual action, we must build on the inherent awe and respect that humans have for nature. We must link action on biodiversity to the resulting personal satisfaction it gives us, the awe for nature that reverberates when we have done the right thing. Second, for decision makers, the Millennium Assessment and the TEEB study provide the economic argument for biodiversity that they can use to develop and implement the required policy change that provides incentives for pro-biodiversity behavior. This is the critical behavior change that is needed at the national level of each party to the CBD for the strategic plan to be successful. In the end, behavior change is up to each one of us and should be made manifest in the role we play every day: father, mother, steward, policymaker, leader. I encourage you to use the International Decade of Biodiversity as the opportunity to commit yourself each day to be, as Gandhi implored us, the change you want to see in the world.